Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely pumped to dive into this one with you, because today we are going to completely deconstruct how human beings make decisions. So often we tend to think of persuasion as this mystical art, right? Like it's some mysterious talent you're either born with or you're not. But the truth, it's actually a totally predictable structural science. Today, we're looking at the actual biological foundations of agreement. And together, we are going to build a functional blueprint to understand exactly how and why people comply.
So I want you to think back for just a second. Recall a recent time when you agreed to something. Maybe it was a favor, a purchase, some random request, and you did it without really overthinking it. You just kind of blurted out, sure. Why did you do that? Was it just a momentary lapse in judgment? No, absolutely not. It's actually a deeply ingrained biological reality of how we make decisions. As we're going to see, your brain is fundamentally wired to bypass heavy analysis under certain specific conditions.
Okay, let's just get right into it. Our blueprint for today's explainer is broken down into 3 simple parts. First, the brain's hidden shortcuts. Second, the 7 triggers of yes. And finally, building your compliance architecture.
All right, starting right off with part 1, the brain's hidden shortcuts.
Listen, to communicate effectively, we first have to understand the actual biological machinery we're communicating with. The human brain is an unbelievable processing engine, but to survive and, process an overwhelming amount of information every single day, it relies on what we call fixed action patterns. Now, I know that sounds like a super dense academic concept, but it's honestly beautifully simple. These are instinctive mental shortcuts. Think of them as pre-programmed behavioral tapes running in our minds. When the right button gets pushed, boom, the tape just plays. Instead of stopping to analyze a situation from top to bottom, our brains recognize a familiar trigger and jump straight to the conclusion. We say yes without any deep thinking. It is literally the mechanics of automatic agreement.
To really grasp why this matters, just imagine if you had to engage in intense, deep thinking for absolutely every single tiny decision you made in a day. Weighing every pro, every con, analyzing every single piece of data. I mean, you'd be totally paralyzed just trying to pick what to watch on TV, let alone actually making it out of the house. So instead, our brains rely on these mental shortcuts to save energy. They're highly efficient and frankly, they're necessary for our survival. But because they totally bypass our logical filters, they're also incredibly powerful access points for persuasion. If you understand how these shortcuts work, you can bypass that exhausting deep thinking phase entirely.
Which brings us perfectly to section 2, the 7 triggers of yes.
If those fixed action patterns we just talked about are the locked doors in our minds, then these 7 triggers are the specific keys that open them. Human compliance is not random, folks. There are highly distinct motivators driving us to comply instinctively. We've got reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, and the surprisingly powerful because trigger. These right here are your foundational building blocks for persuasion. Now, while all 7 of these are incredible, let's grab a magnifying glass and really zoom in on 3 of the most universally impactful ones.
First up, reciprocity. This trigger taps into a really deep-seated, almost unavoidable human desire to return favors. When someone gives us something, and that could be a physical gift, a piece of valuable information, or honestly, even just a genuine compliment, we feel this heavy psychological burden to give back. It's an incredibly powerful instinct. It drives people toward agreement simply because they feel indebted to the person making the proposal. It's the old, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, hardwired right into our biology.
Next, we've got scarcity. This one is all about wanting what is rare. Think about how your own behavior changes the second you realize an item is running out of stock. That fear of missing out completely bypasses your logical hesitation, doesn't it? Scarcity creates immediate, undeniable urgency. When we believe we might lose the opportunity to get something, its perceived value in our minds just skyrockets. Our brains basically scream at us to act fast, entirely skipping that deep thinking phase.
And our third major highlight is authority. Look, as a society, we are trained from a very young age to trust experts. When we see a lab coat, a fancy title, or certificate of expertise, our brain takes another massive shortcut. Instead of evaluating the actual merit of the argument itself, we simply trust the messenger, recognizing that expert status triggers an automatic yes response, simply because our brain assumes that the authority figure's already done all the heavy analytical lifting for us.
All right, let's move on to our final piece, Section 3, Building Your Compliance Architecture.
So, we've looked at the biology, and we've isolated these neat psychological tricks. But now, it's time to build a reliable framework. That's your compliance architecture.
What this means is that we aren't just throwing random tricks at the wall to see what sticks, right? A compliance architecture is a deliberate, thoughtful framework. It strategically weaves those distinct motivators we just explored right into the very fabric of your communication. It's all about intentionally guiding how your proposals are presented so they perfectly match the way the human brain naturally wants to process information, and that results in maximum agreement.
Okay, so how do we actually pull this off? It comes down to a super practical 3-step process. Step 1. Understand the behavioral patterns. You have to first recognize that the person you're speaking to is already relying on mental shortcuts. Step 2. Select from the 7 motivators. Depending on your unique situation, you got to choose the right tools. Are you offering a rare opportunity? Well, use scarcity. Are you a renowned expert in your field? Leverage that authority. And finally, step 3. Structure your proposal's communication around those exact chosen motivators. You literally assemble your proposal so it acts like a key fitting perfectly into those human psychological shortcuts. So, there you have it. We have literally just mapped out the structural science of human agreement. You now possess the blueprint to bypass deep thinking and trigger an automatic yes. But here's the thing. Since you now know exactly how this machinery of persuasion works, a really fascinating question to chew on is, how will you ethically govern your use of these behavioral patterns moving forward? It is a huge amount of leverage, and how you choose to use it really matters. I want you to think about that as you structure your next big proposal. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.